There aren't many ways for cooling manufacturers to differentiate atop of a supplier's product, like the Asetek Gen 5 pumps, but you'd be surprised at how much goes into them behind the scenes. NZXT, for example, was the first manufacturer permitted to build a fully custom and complex PCB for its RGB illuminated Kraken coolers, followed up in short order by EVGA, who dropped price significantly for the same-sized radiators while still instituting RGB. We're reviewing the new EVGA CLC 240 today, following up our previous CLC 280 and 120 reviews, and we'll be looking at the noise normalized performance along with total performance overall. This video is brought to you by the Be Quiet Dark Base Pro 900 White Edition. The DBP 900 marks a return to full tower cases, equipped with ample hard drive support, effective noise damping foam, high performance fans, and the option to be inverted into an alternative layout. The tinted tempered glass window and Qi charger add a high-end touch to an already well-built case. Learn more at the link in the description below. To quickly recap the first two reviews of EVGA CLC units, the CLC is named because they're closed-loop coolers. Came out earlier this year. The 120 and 280 were first, and both use Asetek Gen 5 pumps to get you up to speed. Something like the Corsair H100iV2 is also an Asetek pump, as is the entire NZXT Kraken series, the Fractal Celsius series, and basically 80% of coolers in the US market, if not more at this point. So the CLC 240 is new. It's a smaller radiator, obviously, than the 280. It's priced at $110. You can get about $100 with a rebate if you count those. And that's the exact same price as the H100iV2, which is also priced at $110, also with a $10 rebate if you count those. If not, they're both $110. The CLC 280 we originally liked for its value proposition versus other 280mm coolers. A lot of this comes down to the fact that, unlike NZXT, EVGA CLCs are a lot more simplified in terms of the LEDs and the illumination and software and things like that. But it allowed them to compete right in between where the Corsair H series coolers, the H115i, and the NZXT Kraken X62 coolers landed. And the 280 at $130 was and remains a good value. The EVGA CLC 120 we didn't really like at all. It was pretty poor performing overall. It really made no sense to buy it because you could spend a couple dollars more and get a 240mm H100iV2, which offered significantly better cooling performance with better noise levels. So EVGA now has its 240mm option, which will more or less kill the 120, except in specific use cases where you can't fit a 240. And that's what we're reviewing today. So we'll look at the 240 versus the Kraken and Corsair coolers, along with everything else we have on the bench. Just as a reminder here, because it's been a while since we've gone through some of the testing methods, we account for ambient temperature every second, so that goes into a sheet. We can monitor it second to second. We account for power consumption by the CPU at the EPS 12-volt rails, which means we can monitor if the CPU draws more power in one test versus the other, because if it does, it's an invalid test, because power equals heat at the end of the day. And we also account for voltage and frequency, locking them to be the same thing, so it's fixed. It's not automatic. It doesn't change. And then after that point, we run the standard test at max RPM, and then we run a noise normalized 40 dBA test where the cooler is tested for noise levels at 20 inches away from the cooler, at which point we determine a 40 dBA RPM and test again at that RPM for thermals. Starting with the torture test, that's just max RPM for everything, EVGA's CLC 240 cooler performs exceptionally well. It lands at around cooling levels of the slowed down RPM for the Kraken X62 or slowed down CLC 280. The advantage, of course, still goes to the larger coolers. By operating at 1500 RPM, the X62 can match the maxed out CLC 240 performance thermally, but at significantly lower noise levels. We'll look at those in a moment. The same is true for the CLC 280, H115iV2, and so forth. These roughly match the CLC 240 performance, but with lower RPM. At 34.96 Celsius over ambient, the CLC 240 places marginally cooler than the EK Fluid Gaming with Corsair's H100iV2 fans. Compared to the max RPM H100iV2 at 2500 RPM, the CLC 240 manages about a 1 degree Celsius advantage, though is awfully close to our tolerances for error. Considering even just a plus or minus 0.5 degree swing would equalize them, These are pretty close to the same, though EVGA does hold a lead here. Strictly in terms of noise at the peak RPM, which is what most of our previous charts and numbers were based off of, EVGA manages to lay claim to the loudest cooler on the charts. At 58.1 dBA, the CLC240 is rivaling 100% RPM noise levels out of blower fans from reference GPU coolers. At this noise level, we're in intolerable levels of whirring, but we obviously have full control to reduce that noise level as necessary. What we have now are numbers representing peak thermal performance and worst case noise performance. For reference, the CLC280 at 1500 RPM matches the 2500 RPM CLC240 in terms of thermals, but operates at 45 dBA versus 58 dBA. That's what you get with a larger cooler. This is more than a 2 times perceived reduction in noise, as decibels are a logarithmic scale. So as far as the human is concerned, the human ear, you've dropped more than 2x the noise by going to the 280 with the same thermal performance. The Kraken X62 at 1500 RPM is in the same boat, achieving lower noise and equivalent performance. That's again the value, but let's move on to the noise normalized thermal chart where we configure all coolers to output at 40 dBA and then thermally bench them. Normalized at 40 dBA on all coolers, plus or minus about 0.5, the 280mm and 360mm coolers predictably land at the top of the chart. This consists of the 280mm NZXT X62 at 1200 RPM, leading at 35 degrees Celsius delta T over ambient. It also consists of the 360mm Celsius at 1350 RPM at 37 degrees C over ambient, and the 280mm H100iV2 at 38 degrees Celsius over ambient. We next hit the 40C mark with the EK Fluid Gaming 240 Open Loop Kit, cooling only the CPU, and then we encounter the CLC 240 at 1250 RPM from EVGA. The EK Fluid Gaming Kit and EVGA CLC 240 are functionally equivalent in our noise normalized cooling test, as 39.9C and 40.3C fall within usual variants of our test, and we can't really determine at that resolution which is better anyway, so they're functionally the same in this test. Corsair's competing 240mm H100iV2 falls behind at 42 degrees Celsius when noise normalized, and is the closest thing to competition on this newer chart. The H100iV2 is the same price as the EVGA CLC240, so EVGA does command a small victory here, but a 2-degree difference isn't much of one to phone home about. You can buy either cooler knowing that they perform reasonably at 40 dBA, particularly given that they're the same size and about the same price, but be aware obviously that there are differences in other aspects. For example, EVGA has its LED options, whereas the H100iV2 is plain and doesn't have RGB LEDs in it. Whether that's good or not is up to you. So this comes down to the price then, which is $110 for the H100iV2 and EVGA CLC240. They're about the same price. They're pretty close in performance. EVGA outperforms a bit when noise normalized. EVGA has, well, we're not fully sure if the fans are better or if just the solution as a whole works a bit better, but either way, it's marginally better. They have small victories. Where they might not have victories comes in the looks, the appearance. This block is probably a little bit polarizing. It's kind of fat. It's got LEDs, which not everyone wants, and it's EVGA branded LEDs. So if you like those, great, you get it at the same price as the H100iV2. If you don't like them, you get the H100iV2, and it's just a plain block that I think says Corsair on it and has really no LEDs or anything like that. So that's what it comes down to at this point is, do you want those LEDs or not? In terms of installing them on things, they are both Asetek Gen 5 pumps. They have the same mounting kit. They both fit AM4. They fit Threadripper. They fit everything. You just need to have the right bracket for it. And Threadripper comes with an Asetek bracket. You can get AMD and Intel brackets in the box. So they're both pretty much compatible with everything. And then installation-wise, same process, same procedure. So temperature is about the same. Just comes down to how much you care about our 1-ish degree difference, which is pretty close to error, and how much you care about the LEDs. So that's all for this one. As always, you can check us out on patreon.com/gamersnexus. You can go to store.gamersnexus.net to pick up a shirt like this one. This is the GN Graph logo. Subscribe for more. I'll see you all next time. It's your white balance.